Sunni Ali is perhaps the most controversial character in African history. We know little about his early life, who he was or where he came from. But what's clear is that he was a fierce military leader, a man of limitless energy and ambition. He took the throne of the Kingdom of Songhai in the year 1464, and his reign would mark an unprecedented expansion of this kingdom, so that it would soon extend further than the Empire of Mali ever had. But Sunni Ali is remembered very differently by the two sides of Songhai society. In the oral tradition of the griots, he is remembered as Ali Bear or Ali the Great. In the stories of the griots, he is a great and wise man who commanded the powers of magic, the first ever emperor of the Songhai. But in the chronicles written by Muslim scholars, he is remembered as a cruel and tyrannical ruler. The chronicle Tarikh al-Fatash reserves particular condemnation for him.
The tyrant, the cursed, the oppressor, the Sunni Ali, a model of shameful conduct.
It's true that from virtually the moment he took power, Sunni Ali went to war.
To briefly review, in the 1060s, the Empire of Ghana reaches its height. And remember that we said the Kingdom of Ghana became rich and powerful by taxing trade through its kingdom. When Ghana falls around the year 1200, the Empire of Mali begins. It takes over and then expands. Mali becomes a global superpower, so is not only the most powerful kingdom in West Africa, but throughout Africa and the rest of the known world at the time. And the reason that the Kingdom of Mali is able to become that powerful is because in addition to taxing trade that passed through the empire, the same way that the Kingdom of Ghana had done, their expansion gave them control of most of the world's gold and salt. So they controlled the gold and salt trade. Remember, we said in Friday's lesson that most of the world's gold was coming out of the Empire of Mali. Under the Empire of Mali, the Songhai people, who are really just a separate ethnic group living within the Mali Empire, are subject to the Malians. So at one point or another, the Malians and the Songhai peoples were just different ethnic groups, different village communities in West Africa. And at this point in time, the Kingdom of Mali has become powerful and taken over all of its neighboring cities and villages. And the Songhai people, who are out of Gao, Gao is sort of their native lands right here on the bank of the Niger River. The Songhai people from Gao are not happy about this. The Malians came in, they took over the Songhai, and now the Songhai have to bow before the Malian kings, they have to pay taxes, they don't like it, they don't want to be part of the Mali Empire, but they're the defeated people. So the Songhai start off under the Mali Empire as defeated people. Mali has control of the gold salt trade, they're rich, and there is a rivalry. The Songhai want what the Mali have. The Mali are on top for 265 years, for 17 Malian kings. And then that all changes when Sunni Ali comes to power. And Sunni Ali is the African king you see featured here in the middle of your screen. Sunni Ali has been described as ruthless, cruel, effective, and brilliant, especially a brilliant military leader. When Sunni Ali comes to power, Mali is in decline. The leaders of Mali are more interested in beautifying the city. They're not keeping up the military. People are starting to raid the gold, and Sunni Ali sees a chance to grab power. So he raises his military, and he focuses specifically on the Navy. planning an attack on the waterways, particularly the Niger River, since the Niger River passes through all of the major cities throughout the Kingdom of Mali. Not only that, but all of the gold salt trade travels along these rivers, since that is a much more efficient way to move these heavy cargoes. So Sunni Ali realizes that controlling the Niger River controls the empire. So what he does is he builds up a huge army in Gao. He builds ships, plans to make these navy attacks, and then he'll have horses and soldiers follow along and attack the river cities, which are the lifeblood of the empire. He alerts the governor who's in charge of Timbuktu that he's planning to attack. He says, "Be ready, I'm going to take the city. You can join me if you want." The Malian governor of Timbuktu flees, and he takes the military with him. They know they can't defeat Sunni Ali. His military is just too powerful. So when Sunni Ali comes into Timbuktu, there's no one to protect the city. And it may not have been necessary, but Sunni Ali then proceeds to slaughter all of the people left in the city. These are civilians that he's slaughtering. Again, he's well known for being ruthless.
He was determined to modernize and reorganize his military. He had seen the Mali Empire collapse after its access to horses fell apart, and so he resolved to begin the large-scale breeding of horses in Africa. He built large stables to shelter these horses from the elements and from the disease-carrying tsetse fly, and he pioneered the use of crossbreeding to generate a breed of sturdy horses well suited to the African environment. He also introduced the use of cavalry soldiers wearing iron breastplates beneath their tunics. These must have been difficult to wear in the African heat, but they would have greatly increased the weight and strength of his cavalry. One of his great passions was also the use of a river navy. He expanded the raiding boats that the Songhai had used in their rebellion until the Songhai commanded a large fleet of 400 boats that could transport troops up and down the Niger River at rapid speeds. He named one of his generals the admiral of this fleet, with the title Master of the Water. He loved these boats so much that during one siege of the city of Jenne, lying many kilometers away from the river, Sunni Ali had a long canal dug so that his boats could continue supplying his men on the siege lines. During this time, the Songhai abandoned guerrilla raids, instead taking on a more sustained and aggressive style of warfare. The chronicle Tarikh el-Sudan recalls the remarkable success that Sunni Ali enjoyed.
Ali was always victorious, pillaging every land on which he fixed his choice. Wherever he was present, his armies were never defeated. From Kanta to Sibi Ridogo, his horses ran over all these lands.
Part of the success of his campaign seems to have been his extreme ruthlessness, which we get some sense of through the Timbuktu Chronicles. One example is his treatment of a tribe known as the Fulbe, and he seems to have reserved a particular and unexplained hatred for these people. When they rebelled against their Songhai conquerors, Sunni Ali marched on them and had them executed en masse, so that if the chronicles are to be believed, their remaining population could fit beneath the shade of a single tree. His mood changed rapidly. He flew in and out of rages, sometimes condemning people to death, only later to change his mind and let them go free. Because of this unpredictable and at times brutal nature, Sunni Ali is described using an astonishing array of nicknames in the great chronicles of Timbuktu.
Ali the Merciless,
The degenerate,
the Accursed, the great tyrant.
Arrogant one.
Ali the Godless.
The profligate.
Cold-hearted.
The despotic one.
Arrogant one.
The shedder of blood.
The notorious evildoer.
The killer of so many people that only God the Most High knows the number.
It's at this point that I should introduce a note of caution about these characterizations. It's certainly possible that Ali was just as ruthless and bloodthirsty as they say. History, after all, is full of kings like this, and it's not hard to see why. Recent research has found that today, up to 20% of people found in the upper echelons of the corporate business world exhibit signs of psychopathy, compared to only 1 in 100 in the general population. And when violence was so often the key to power in the Middle Ages, there's no reason to believe that this number would be any lower among medieval kings. But to give Sunni Ali some credit, it's worth pointing out that these chronicles were written after his death, and on the order of kings who were trying to legitimize their own line of succession. Part of the way they tried to do this was to trash Sunni Ali's reputation. We should always bear in mind that these chronicles were very much political tools. But whatever else we can say about him, it's clear that Sunni Ali was a complicated man. This king appears to have stemmed from a number of deep-seated insecurities. Chief among these seems to have been a hatred and distrust of scholars and their learning. It's not clear why exactly Ali felt this way. Perhaps, like some politicians today, he cultivated a kind of anti-elitist populism, which held knowledge and expertise in contempt. There were many rumours circulating about him too, rumours that he was not really a Muslim, that he only paid lip service to the religion. And perhaps he saw these scholarly communities as the source of these rumours. Perhaps, quite simply, he couldn't read, and he hated those who could. Whatever the reason, the effects were the same, and they would come to bloody fruition when Ali set his sights on perhaps the greatest prize in all of Western Africa, the great capital of scholars, the heart of learning, the eternal library city of Timbuktu. Timbuktu has the perfect climate for producing and keeping books. Books here were written on sheepskins, on tree bark, and on paper imported from Italy, and the dry desert air meant that their pages never warped or cracked. Books were written here in countless African languages, like Songhai and Fulani, but also in Arabic. Some were even illuminated with gold leaf. Timbuktu's people saw these books as symbols of wealth and power, and so an active trade in literature began with the rest of the Islamic world, until hundreds of thousands of manuscripts were collected here over the course of centuries. The city of Gao was the administrative centre of West Africa, but Timbuktu was its intellectual centre. If Gao was the heart of the Sahel, then Timbuktu was its brain. And this was the city against which the ruthless Sunni Ali, the great hater of books and learning, marched in the year 1468. Sunni Ali made no secret about his intentions for the city of Timbuktu. He sent a messenger into the city ahead of his army to deliver a chilling warning to its remaining citizens. The medieval chronicle Tarikh al-Fatash recalls this event.
The messenger arrived at midday. The drum that he had brought with him was beaten, and the crowd gathered around him. Unsheathing a sword and brandishing it by the hilt, he said, "This is the sword of the king. I have been ordered to cut the throat of anyone who stays the night in this town." In the blink of an eye, all the town's inhabitants fled. Some did not even take their supper that night, while others forgot to bring blankets for sleeping. The sun had still not set before Timbuktu was completely evacuated. Most of the townsfolk fled without bothering to close the doors of their houses.
After the flight of its defenders, Ali succeeded in capturing Timbuktu without much resistance. And he was not merciful with the community of scholars who lived there. Ali immediately ordered his soldiers to gather together all the books he could find in the city and burned them in great bonfires. Luckily, many of the scholars and wealthy families who fled had taken their collections with them, saving some proportion of this ancient collection. Some also managed to hide their books in secret places. But Sunni Ali executed any scholars who remained behind. This is another time when Ali's cruelty just didn't seem to have a point to it. There was no tactical reason to victimize these scholars. It seems to have stemmed from something rooted deep in his personality, something that we as historians can only guess at. In fact, over the remaining 24 years of his reign, Ali would embark on no fewer than 5 purges of the city, attacking its noble families, destroying its books and schools, and expelling its scholars.
Sunni Ali eventually dies under mysterious circumstances. He drowns in a river, which is ironic since he was this brilliant naval leader who captured the empire by leading an attack on those very same rivers. The official accounts say it was an accidental drowning, but historians have speculated that Sunni Ali made so many enemies and killed so many people, it's just as likely this was a planned assassination made to look like an accidental drowning. Eventually, Songhai fell to Moroccan invaders, ending the great era of West African empires. Because Morocco wanted to control the Saharan salt mines, it invaded Songhai. The Moroccans brought with them a terrible new weapon, an early form of the gun. The Moroccan guns and cannons brought disaster to Songhai, who had no weapon that could match it. The cities of Songhai were taken over and looted.